because Western is the only online asynchronous program in the state to offer licensure. Greeley also does it, UNC, but you got to drive to their campus to complete their coursework. So we are it. And that's why we're seeing, obviously, the growth that we're seeing. And it's very exciting. Our average age is 41 years old in this program, and the average credit amount is about 65 credits. So we're talking about people who are halfway done. Some have associate's degrees. And then, we've been able to scholarship these licensure students up to 85%. When was the last time you went back to school and they knocked 85% off the bill? But we're doing that because we have state support, and we're also now interacting with other organizations to line up, if you will, more support.
Welcome to the Kooler Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn, and I'm excited to have you join me as I interview community members and business leaders from the communities in which I live, work, and serve through my business Kooler Garage Doors. We're going to bring you highlights on characters in our communities. Why? Because community matters, and I want to know more about who is behind our business and leadership in order to understand and support the community fabric that our relationships make up. And collectively, we can build stronger communities that support our lifestyles, our youth, and our health.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kooler Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn. Today I have the pleasure and honor to sit down with Dr. Terry Shliesman. He's the director of the Adult Degree Completion and professor of Communication Arts at Western Colorado University. Terry, good morning. How are you?
Morning, Matt. Nice to see you again, and I'm doing well. Thanks. Yourself?
I'm doing really good. Tell me, where is your office located? Where are you beaming in from?
I'm in Taylor Hall. One of the few perks faculty have left on this campus, as far as like what we have control over, is office space. And so over the years, I've been able to command a pretty nice perch that overlooks the Taylor Quad Lawn. And that's where I'm broadcasting from the studios of Taylor 212E, which also doubles as my office.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to chat with you, Terry.
Yeah.
I know we're going to get into a lot of the pieces that are kind of developing and that we're excited about at Western. And I've known you over the years through various different roles. We had some shoulder rubbing going on at our local mentoring organization. And I've also known you because in your summer gig, you've been a painter, and I've got some painting history in the background too.
Indeed.
And so that's been really fun. I'm curious, I want to start us off with kind of my typical question, but I'm interested to know where you grew up.
Oh, all right. You want to go that far back? It takes a little while for the needle to find the space on the disc here. Just a minute. Well, Matt, I was raised in central Washington in a small agricultural valley, the Kittitas Valley in Ellensburg, Washington. So if you've traveled from Seattle east, you're on I-90, and you have to go through Ellensburg to get to like Spokane and Idaho and Montana and all of that. So Ellensburg is a home of Central Washington University, as well as some of the best hay in the world, Timothy hay, which is shipped all over the world. So I was raised in a small town with a lot of culture because of some employers, but mostly the agricultural center of Central Washington is located there. And of course, Central Washington University, and that's not a small university. That's 9,000 to 12,000 students, and so that's where I grew up. And it was. I hate to say it. I mean, certainly I had a privileged background once I got out into the real world and found out how lucky I was and how I was raised with a supportive family and middle class. My parents both worked for a university, and I was the middle of 4 children. And we were encouraged to do well in school, to be active, both in the community and in the co-curriculars. And I probably gravitated, Matt, more towards like the community through jobs. I remember very young, like at age 13. And I feel very good about this today. My father didn't just like write us checks. I mean, we had no allowance. Though we were taken care of, we had to go out and do things, right? And I know it sounds like I'm walking to school in 5 feet of snow and I'm eating large sandwiches for lunch, but it wasn't quite that bad. But he made us, if you will, in addition to the work we had to do around the house, we had to go get work if we wanted to earn money, if we wanted to buy things. And so that was mowing yards. Then very young, I think age 14, I started in the restaurant industry. So that
Yeah.
has served me really well over the years. The notion that you got to wake up in the morning, you got to go get something, as far as like wages. And those wages come through solving people's problems. And I got that right away.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I can't say I excelled as a student. I was a very average student, but I was very busy as a student. And what I mean by that is I wasn't very serious about my studies. I was a major distraction for the teachers. And today I would spend probably most of my time at another type of school across the street with some long title associated with it. But basically I was a troublemaker. And I'm not proud of that, but from that, I learned a whole nother way of sort of existing in this world. I was smart enough to stay out of like serious trouble. Somehow I avoided all that. But anyway, and it's enough so that today I avoid certain aisles in the grocery stores if my old teachers are in those aisles. And I think it's because I'm in education now, and I really pride myself for doing well in education. But I was at best a C- student all the way up through about my sophomore, junior year in college, which was Central Washington. I was fortunate. I stayed in the same town, but lived across town in an apartment. And
Okay.
yeah, so, I mean, I was lucky. I didn't have to like fend for my life and worry about where my parents were, or did I, where are my parents? Who are my parents? And I've thought about that many times. Like, why do we get certain structure in this world, and why do we not get certain structure or certain opportunities? But I've obviously been very grateful about that over my lifetime.
Yeah.
So,
What I love about
yeah, go ahead.
didn't mean to cut you off
No,
there,
it's all
Terry,
good.
but what I love
I've
about
got my first
what you're
coffee
sharing
in front of me. So this
yeah.
could be a 40-minute question right here. The caffeine is kicking in.
Yeah, I get that. I'm the same. What I love about your story, and this is something that just hit me just the other day with my own son.
Mhm.
And, we do have this striation we have socioeconomic differences, right? And there is a piece where, my message to listeners, and I think this is resonating with how you were parented, is like, don't make it easy for your kids, right?
Yeah.
There's a choice. You don't have to make it easy. And in fact, don't make it easy. My example, like my son's getting into, what are they called? The airline, like he flies simulators.
Yeah, sure. Good for him.
He's flying planes on the simulator. And, I've yet to go in and buy him everything that he wants. And he's just using free stuff online.
Mhm.
But he really wanted to get the joystick.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going to buy you a joystick. So he ended up making one out of his Lego set.
Wow.
And it's freaking awesome.
Wow.
And then he made a second version of it that is even better because he wasn't psyched with the actualization of it. And so at any rate, it just hit me. I was like, oh man, like, I'm glad I didn't make it easy for this kid, because now he's engaging his brain. He's putting this engineering component together and coming up with it. And I'm hearing the same thing, to where don't make it easy so that, we could figure it out. There's also some pieces around, the seeds or the chick cracking out of the egg. And if we make it too easy, they're not going to
it's a delicate balance.
survive.
And I would really encourage what your son's doing. You're going to end up with flight benefits. You got to look at it from that perspective.
Right. I know.
You've paid your dues. Now you get to travel the world. Sure, you're a
my wife and I,
duct tape to the airplane wing, but you're going to get to Hawaii for free.
That's right.
Laura and I can write a book on standby flight. But no, you're right. It's like, how do we put opportunity in front of? And I don't look at that as just our children. Of course, I'm in education, and I don't mean to say therefore, but our whole gig is, how do we put enough challenge in front of a human to, in essence, frustrate them and instill a little fear, and yet enough support to lift them up and to rise to the occasion? And we can call it a quiz, a project, an internship, a conversation that happens in a hallway. All of it is about, you got this. You can do this. Let's go for it. I'm here to help. And that's what we're doing with our children every day, right? Though that would sound pretty sappy. If I told that to my kids who are now long gone, not gone, but they're out of the house, I wouldn't even get halfway through that statement. They'd be like heading downstairs to do something. So it's an interesting role to mentor, right? To have an impression on people. And we do it every single day in our walk of life. And obviously I'm a big advocate for leaving a positive impression behind, if it's possible. There are some people that don't like me on this planet. Maybe they'll watch this podcast because I had to make hard decisions as manager. And, you know what that leads to for some people who aren't working out. And I get it. Like I dished out a lot of F's, but you know what? There was a fair chance. And most of the people I really enjoyed working with.
Hey everybody, this is Luke from Kooler Garage Doors. Just want to take a quick second to talk about our sponsor, Sommar Garage Door Openers. We believe Sommers are the best in the business when it comes to garage door openers. We always recommend them for residential installs because of the many features they have, such as Wi-Fi connectivity and safety features like a fixed chain that runs along a secure rail for a quiet and safe operation. Click the link to find out more about Sommar Garage Door Openers.
Can I give you one quick anecdote? We have a minute or two left, don't we, for this podcast?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
So
we're just getting started.
I had
here.
a turning point, and I think everybody has some kind of turning point they can talk to. Maybe not. Maybe most people are on just a line of like what we call best fit in statistics, right? It's just this beautiful, straight, linear piece. That's not my life.
Yeah.
I had a kick up in my junior year, meaning like my potential went up. My sense of purpose went up. I was in an advertising class at Central Washington University, Matt, and I was a marketing minor. So I had to have that advertising class along with all business majors. And I was also a broadcast journalism major. So the class that was dreaded was advertising from Charles Gwatney, who was a retired officer from the Vietnam War out of the Marines.
Yeah.
And he actually came up with Kawasaki Let the Good Times Roll, among other phrases that we still know today. He was in advertising after Vietnam. And we were going through this 10-week class, and about week 6, we had a major project that we had to be working on from week 2 to week 10, right? That kind of a project. And at week 6, I headed in to talk to my minor advisor, who was not Gwatney. Stay with me, Matt, stay with me. And I'm going down McConnell Hall, and here comes Gwatney, Professor Gwatney with another student. And this is one of those classic, academic buildings that are massive, right? And you can hear the steps coming and all of that. And he says, hey, Terry. I said, hello, Professor Gwatney. And the other student was just suspended, of course, had to just like grovel. And Gwatney says, how's that project coming along? And I looked at him, I said, well, it's going great. It's fine, And there was this awkward pause. And he said, Shliesman, can I cuss on this podcast or not?
Yeah,
you can't. And this is like, I've warned the whole audience. He said, Shliesman, and maybe you've heard this. He said, you need to quit treating me like a mushroom. And it just echoed in my head, and yet it was very awkward. So I said something. I had some sound come out of my mouth. And he looked at me very odd, and he said, you don't know what I mean by that, do you? And you can imagine, like, it's just painful. I said, no, I don't know. And he said, the way you raise mushrooms is you put them in the dark and you surround them with horse shit. And didn't say anything after that. And he said, I want to see you in my office tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. And I was there. I had to pass class. It was my junior year, but I was trying to get the minor done. I go in to talk to him, and he says, Shliesman, he never called me Terry, right? Shliesman, always Shliesman. And he said, where are you at on this project? And I just said, I'm not doing that well. I'm not really motivated. I appreciate the topic. I like advertising a lot, but I haven't really got started on this project yet. And he said, I want to make a prediction. You're going to fail this class and you're not going to do well on this project. What sickens me about you, I can still hear him say this. What sickens me about you is 3/4 of the world would like to have the opportunities you have. You make me sick. You're a piece of shit. And he said that, man. He said, you're a piece of shit. Now get out of my office. And I walked in and I just said, nobody has the right to talk. And I wasn't going to file a complaint. He had me like I was in his class. I had to have the class. I said, I'll show you, right? And it became one of those I'll show you moments. And he ended up being one of my closest mentors because he gave me some kind of right to succeed, right? My dad was always there for me. My mother was always there for me, but there wasn't enough of a motivation for me to do well for some reason. Like I couldn't rise to the occasion just because of my parents. That's odd to say because I, of course, adore them. But Watney changed my life. And from there, I started taking like leadership roles on campus. I started doing better at work, even working harder than I had before. And my grades turned around. And of course, that never changed all the way through graduate school. And what he taught me was that the clock is ticking, even when you're young, and you have to do well. And you have to do well for the sake of doing well. It's too easy to fall asleep at the wheel and just have an average existence. And that obviously has stuck with me, and I try to pass that along. So the C- students I've worked with at Western wake me up because there's another chance to make a difference, right? To change somebody's life. And that really was like the most valuable moment, really. I mean, I've had other moments I can talk about in my childhood, but most of them were on the other side of the law, right? Like narrowly escaping situations. But Watney, I'm very pleased to say, it turned out well and I did well in that class. But it's only because I was going to prove it to him that he was categorically wrong about who I was and what I was going through. He was right, of course. I had a lot of privilege that I didn't appreciate. But anyway, so that's a quick story. I know that's very sappy, but it's a true one and one that I cherish.
No, it's
it's
beautiful,
we all had those
man.
kinds of little lessons that we had to learn the hard way to get on with our life.
That's right.
And so anyway, so that's that.
Right.
I'd sure like to leave the past behind us. I ended up going to Seattle. I worked in radio. I worked in radio for about 4 years. Really wasn't that fond of radio, to tell you the truth. And I was on the business side, the sales side. I didn't appreciate that type of work, cold calling day to day. It was very difficult work, and I admire people who do that. I didn't have the fortitude, but I succeeded at it back in a small town. In Seattle, I was lost. So I moved on. I got a master's degree and went into corporate training with a big company called Expeditors. They're importing and exporting based out of Seattle. The training thing was going to put me on the road a lot, and I had to go back and defend my thesis for my master's. I was done with everything but just defending the document. And it was at that time, another faculty member at Washington State University reached out and said, I've got the funding. If you want to continue teaching, let's work on a PhD together. So we did, and I studied the way the internet was being used in high schools and changing interpersonal communication patterns. So that was a PhD in sociology, education, computer science, and communication. And from that, I was hired at Gunnison as a professor in '98, coming out of that program.
Right on.
So, that kind of takes us up to the Gunnison days.
Yeah. Have you always wanted to be in higher ed? Is that something you knew early on? Or is that
I want nothing to do with higher ed or anything to do with a classroom. Where all of that changed is I was kind of hitting a dead end with broadcasting, and anybody who's in broadcasting, more power to you. Ironically, I spent 20 years advising a radio station here at Western, but I just needed some options, Matt, and I wanted to get into some kind of industry where I wouldn't necessarily have to be piecemealing everything together. Like I wanted some stability. I had done quite a bit of restaurant work and all of that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I wanted something else. And so it was with that master's degree, Matt, I was teaching classes in exchange for tuition. And they throw a bag of potatoes at Laura and I, every other week or so we'd get like, I don't know, $500. I mean, it was just minimum wage. But the big thing was they waived my tuition, which was thousands and thousands of dollars every year. And that's where I got to stand in front of a class for the first time. I was standing in front of people metaphorically in broadcasting. I was a class clown doing voices and all that crap. So it was nothing new to stand in front of people. But this was in a structured way, of course, right? With lesson plans and all.
Yeah.
So that's where that started. And then I really got the bug. It doesn't seem like much, but when you expect me to say this, but when you reach into somebody's sort of soul and impact them, that's very contagious. And I think that happens at the employer-employee level too. Like it's extremely contagious when you realize you are now perpetuating goodwill and in some of the most profound ways. And so I knew I'd be taken care of if I worked in higher ed. I'd never be rich, but it would be a good quality of life. And so at that point I said, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for the PhD because that's tenure track, and tenure track leads to tenure, and tenure leads to some stability. And that's what all that was about. I didn't ever aspire to write theory or to, command sessions at conferences and write books. That was never my MO. It was really to get in front of students and to teach. And that's what Western's all about.
Yeah. I love this.
Good,
Let's,
glad you do. Because I'm getting sick to my stomach just listening to myself.
What I enjoy about this is almost the attack on average.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us can fall into average, and it can be a quote unquote comfortable place, even though we might be uncomfortable on some certain level. And it is those people, those experiences that challenge us in any given moment. And I know you recognize this, and I've seen it throughout my years as a receiver of this, but also as a provider of this. And it's a gift on both ends to be that moment, to bring it real.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity for that person to grow and to shift.
Yeah.
And
Indeed.
and it's really, really beautiful. What is happening at Western that we're excited about, and how is this kind of furthering the mission of going against average, if you will?
Yeah. Well, some of the more visible stuff that people are seeing in this valley, of course, and what President Baca is rightfully touting is our new engineering program. And I'm not involved directly with that, but thanks to the generous gift of Mr. Rady, we have a new program in cooperation with CU Boulder. I'm sure you know about this program. It's a cooperative, which kind of blows people's minds, but it's happened in higher ed just about everywhere, where we work with CU Boulder students who wouldn't have normally gotten in because of capacity in Boulder. And we work with them through general education and some of their earliest education classes as Western faculty, and then they work with CU Boulder faculty right here on campus in pursuing their engineering degrees. Now that's all happening in the Rady building, which is also an asset to this community, $40-50 million building.
Beautiful building.
On campus. So that's exciting. Our graduate programs have grown categorically. And of course, we don't see that in this valley much because a lot of it is online enrollment. And so it doesn't have the same impact directly, right, on people moving in as students and shopping and all that. But of course, all of their tuition and fees and all of that stay sort of in the valley. And some of those graduate programs do, by the way, have a residency component to it where they're required to come to campus. And then, we're making inroads with the new strategic plan. It's still under draft stage, but I think you're going to see in the next 3 to 4 years some very exciting new academic programs that we're exploring, possibly, in the realm of medicine. I'm not saying a medical doctor's program, but maybe some fields that are affiliated with the growing shortage of medical employees. There's that. I think we're doing a lot on campus right now with DEI measures, right? And that is extremely important. It's the last 8 years have been very interesting for Western. I'm just going to leave it at that. We had a leadership style that was pretty ambitious, but also rough on relationships here on campus. And I think anybody who lives in the Valley is aware of this. I don't want to dismiss or to denigrate the leadership that we previously had. I think that we had some strong points to that leadership, that administration, and we had some parts that were sort of almost everlasting, threatening or damaging. And what we're talking about is just respect and trust for each other on campus. Now that can go too far sometimes, and we don't get our tasks done. All we're dealing with is touchy-feely, and that, and I'm not on that side either. But for someone who's been at Western for quite a while, I certainly can recognize changes that are happening and some that are not so positive. So I'm glad to say that with President Baca's leadership, we're mending some of that relationship. It does take a while for that to happen. We have a new vice president for inclusivity, and that's quite a commitment when you start building out that structure and organization. And we're moving forward on DEI measures as part of our strategic plan, and that's amazing. The area I'm in, Matt, and I didn't start with this because I think there's a bigger perspective on Western. It's not just about one single program on campus, right? It's the entire operation.
Yes.
But for me, it's the adult degree completion program. We started this as a concept 5 years ago. It came out of a previous strategic plan that we really need to do more in the digital domain in the name of education. Now, that's not our calling card. As you know, we're a residence campus. People have for 100 years have packed up their cars, traveled to Gunnison, and have stayed here for 4, 6, 9 years or longer, right, in Gunnison.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing. We don't want to dismiss the ecosystem in which we operate in, right? We're all here. Many of us are here for that reason. But the trends in higher ed have shifted, my friend, and fewer, and this is what Dr. Salisbury was talking about a lot. the fewer and fewer high school graduates are interested in that residential experience. And I don't have the percentages memorized, but there's been a shift to local urban schools, right? And that's concerning, right? That should be concerning for everybody in this valley if you care about our economics.
Yes.
So Western can't sit here and just look at those statistics and those growth charts or the enrollment numbers. We've got to be doing some things, and that's what the digital piece is about. Like, hey, where else can we grow our expertise? Where else can we deliver what we do well? And so one of 3 ideas in that strategic plan was an adult degree completion program. I was fortunate enough to be working as an associate vice president. Those are terms that we fill as faculty. And Dr. Nimi Golini asked me to write a concept paper, a business proposal, basically, which it did. That proposal was tabled for 2 years. It didn't bother me. I went off and chaired our department again. And then when I came back, Dr. Nimi said, I'd like you to launch this. And so we started it by devising curriculum that was around a business communications major, right? So it'd be fitting someone who's in business and interested in the basics of business as well as digital productions. And then we brought in a second major called the general studies. And we do that for flexibility. Like people come in and they've got all this credit and don't know what to make of it. They're mostly interested in finishing that degree and getting that certificate so they can move on with their career. And a general studies program serves you well in that way, kind of an a la carte program, right? So we started in year 1. We picked up about a half a dozen business comm majors right away. That was last year. And then a year ago, we launched a general studies focus with licensure. So now we're pairing general studies with a licensure unit in education, targeting paraprofessionals, what you and I called aides in K-12. When I was young, they were called aides. Today, they're called paraprofessionals. So they're working full-time in school districts. And about 22,000 Coloradans have this job called paraprofessionals, Matt. Some of them are what's called some college or some credit and no degree. They've started school, but they didn't finish. So we're here to help them finish the degree. And then they work through our education department in the licensure unit, in a classroom in their school district, and then they move into a teacher role. So all of this is digital. It's all asynchronous, meaning we have no live moments in the program. Nobody has to be anywhere at one particular time until they get to their licensure. They have to be in a classroom when classes meet, obviously. But I'm talking about K-12 classes, not our classes, right? So we're now, that program went from 0 students a year ago to we're around 50 students right now, just under 50. So it's really taken off. Yeah. And what's most exciting is we have these third parties, call them state entities, capital investment groups, and nonprofits that are interested in workforce advancement. So now we're interacting with them saying, how do we ramp this up? Because Western is the only online asynchronous program in the state to offer licensure. Greeley also does it, UNC, but you got to drive to their campus to complete their coursework. So we are it. And that's why we're seeing, obviously, the growth that we're seeing. And it's very exciting. Our average age is 41 years old in this program, and the average credit amount is about 65 credits. So we're talking about people who are halfway done. Some have associate's degrees. And then, we've been able to scholarship these licensure students up to 85%. When was the last time you went back to school and they knocked 85% off the bill? But we're doing that because we have state support, and we're also now interacting with other organizations to line up, if you will, more support. I have a little bit of a problem with that because I think everybody should have some skin in the game and should be paying something for education. That's my personal view. I don't believe in things that are free. I think it's quickly exploited. Personally, I don't have a lot of evidence for that. It's just the way I was raised, you might say. But so I don't have a problem charging the students something. But these are people that are making on average below $35,000 a year. So we've got to recognize that. And the two constructs that stand in the way, Matt, are finances and life, meaning feasibility of going back to school. And we have now addressed both of them. So naturally, we're seeing rapid growth in our program. So that's what I'm excited about.
This is amazing.
I'm excited about it. ADC, right, is a shorthand for that. And anybody who wants to learn more, it's western.edu/ADC, right? Very straightforward. And that takes us to...
Let me summarize, Terry, so I can make sure I get this and that the listeners get this. But this adult degree completion, it is a real innovation that is giving I mean, Western is at the forefront of this, and it's serving students around the state that need to complete whatever it is they may have started in the past, and life gets in the way, finances get in the way. And this is a true resource. It hits me because, when I was growing up, my parents divorced when I was in 7th grade, and it was shortly thereafter that my mom put herself through school to get her CPA.
Good for her.
And I was so impressed. I've always carried that because she was working full time,
hard
myself and my sister.
That's a tough study.
And she was a grinder.
Yeah.
And so it's just speaking to my heart in that sense, because it does allow for adults who may be parents, and it's again getting back to this this loop of average, and it's an opportunity to be above average, right? And to piece it together, get licensure that can then increase pay, increase lifestyle, and all the ripples that can happen after that.
That's right. And where it's going, Matt, next step for us is like the open house, which I don't want to date this because you may release this 4 years from now, this production, who knows, because of something I said and you just want it to sort of pass over. But, we have that open house that's going on next week. That represents, we're trying to engage business leaders and to say, look, think about investing in your staff. Think about, it may not be a bachelor's degree. Maybe it's a certificate. What do you need as leadership to build your organization? And how do we meet you at the place where everybody is content with that, right? And so we're trying to work with employers to say, can we tailor some things here that might fit the needs of your organization? Now, we can't roll out 35 different certificates willy-nilly. I don't want to mislead you, but we don't have to always offer like the big block called the major. It can be a 12th credit certificate. And accounting, like what your mother had the CPA, which is like the full Monty. That's the big burrito. But, what about 2 to 3 classes in accounting and 1 class in finance, or, just like quantitative literacy in business, or marketing, or we got digital courses on campus. I mean, there's all these things that we can do, and we don't need to travel to a space to get this done. So we're trying to move beyond what we're doing, like in education. That's good, and we expect that to grow. We'd like to push that to 100 to 200 students in the next couple of years, and that's by working with school districts directly and having them bring in cohorts of paraprofessionals. So groups of 4, 5, 6 students from their district come to Western. And those students have to be in their 40s and 50s or 30s, but they're still students, and they have each other for support. Yes. But now we're looking at the Highway 50 corridor and saying, well, how do we work with employers in the same way so that we can package educational products that move their organization forward and increase retention for their employees, minimize turnover? That's going to come at a cost. There's a price for education, but we think we've priced this at very low levels, right? The average out there is about $300 to $600 per credit, and we're hovering around $350, including fees per creded. And that's with no scholarship. Yeah. That's just like sticker price. So, we can, that's the great thing about a little program like this. We're a little more malleable than the big programs on campus. And we can sit down with someone over coffee and say, we may not have this ready for you next week, but let's talk about trying to move your organization forward through one of the things Western can do, which is the expertise, the lessons that we teach in these different disciplines. They may be helpful, they may not. And Matt, that moves us quite a ways away from our liberal arts mission. I'm going to pause here in case you want to edit this out. Okay, good. There's the edit cut right there. But liberal arts means a lot in this day and age. It's not just a hokey, and it's definitely not politics. We are not talking about moving to the left side of the spectrum. Liberal arts is a cross-training of disciplines, and we've had it for hundreds of years in higher education. We are very proud of this, that you get a degree, but you're also able to understand political science, the arts, right? How to build an experiment in a science class, how to appreciate the co-curriculars on a campus and someone stepping forward and playing a role in something. All of this is going on in a kind of a learning lab. And that's not, ADC doesn't really go there, right? We are much more like design it, fit it into organization, and help the organization. We're much more like market directed and a much more practical look at education. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
It doesn't
totally.
change
Yeah,
Western's
yeah.
mission to serve Coloradans with higher education.
Beautiful. So we've got the western.edu/ADC
Yes,
for anybody that
brother.
wants to
Amen.
learn more.
Yeah.
And
/ADC.
we'll include we'll include those notes in our show notes for sure.
Yeah.
And Terry, here's a question for you, and it gets a little bit more personal, and I think a great way to summarize our conversation.
Sure.
It's kind of a combined question because in one way I'm interested to know, and I've got a little bit of a sense through the years and through this conversation of what drives you.
Yeah.
What do you get up for in the morning? And the second end of this question is, at your level in the career now, what do you see as the legacy? What are you building? What are you leaving for the other generations?
Well, I appreciate the question to begin with, because we all think about these things, and if not, check the pulse. I firmly believe that we're all purpose driven. I don't want to say this is me 24/7. Go ask Laura. She teaches at the high school. She's available, and she'll tell you I have my off days and I have my downtime. I have my time when I just want to be maybe with my two springers out bird hunting by myself. I'm not always this gregarious. And that's fine. It sort of recharges my batteries. We're hiking or fly fishing, whatever it is that we're doing. But, the question is, what makes me jump out of bed in the morning? I think we've talked about it in this program so far, but it's the idea that that people are malleable. The people around us are malleable. And we're going to have quality of life if we have community. And I believe that to my roots, that whether that is a town of 50 or a city of 1 million, humans are destined to build community. And I'm not cut out to be a, city council or one of the county committee. I'm not interested in serving that way. And I applaud those who do, but I am interested in a cross section of a community, of getting my experiences through some of the nonprofits, some of the galas. Rita Merrigan, a retired teacher, she and I own a labor negotiations consulting firm with school districts mostly. I enjoy staying active because it isn't like morbid, but this is like my time to make an impression. And I don't want anything in return. Like, I'm just wired this way, that ultimately, when it's all said and done, like, that's what we had, is a chance to interact and to, if you will, impress upon one another our values, right? And for better or worse. I don't want to go to what's happening sort of at a national level right now, but in the end of the day, I think many of us are searching for a sense of place and community. And of course, Gunnison offers that. That's why we've stayed here. We left for 1 year, but we were brought back because of this community. I was lucky enough to get a promotion at Western, but that's what motivates me, Matt, is the idea that in this crazy mix called the life, that we are able to impact one another. And that sounds pretty nebulous, but we've all figured out how to get that done. And even going overboard and like stretching ourselves too far and having to pull back. And I'm certainly guilty of that. Like, why am I doing all of this? But that's it. I think that's it. And a good friend of mine, Mike Majeko, he always razzes me about being a do-gooder and being like trying to be the community saint. And yet I think he gets it. Like, I'm just wired this way. And I say all of that, and yet I've had my own sort of hiatus from volunteering in this community, right? I just got to a point where I just needed to step back. I'm now sort of re-engaging a little more, but that's kind of what I guess it's all about. I enjoy interacting with people. I am one of those that keeps you in City Market for another 5 minutes. I'm proud of that. And I was raised that way. Like, it's important to take care of one another. And I say that, and I know that I have flipped the bird to as many people as anyone else in town. So I don't want to be a hypocrite. And I certainly am not saintly. I'm definitely not holy. And yet, if you know me well enough, you know that I do have a good heart. And many people in this valley have a good heart. And that's what keeps this place so incredibly attractive, is the community and the people. And I don't think that's over the top. I think that's very true. And you see that in our events, on Main Street with a not parade. Damn, I almost said parade of lights, the street of lights. And, you see it like it's there, and it's really a cool thing. So I'm glad that Laura and I have had the chance to have a role in that over the last 2.5 decades or whatever it's been.
Yeah.
So
I certainly appreciate it. Yeah. And Terry, your heart is gold. I love the innovation that's being developed over at Western.
I do too.
Think it's important. You alluded to the fact of how economically important Western is to our entire county and the community fabric. Yeah. So I just want to give a shout out to you, the team over there.
Thanks,
I think it's super good to look at the changing times and to be able to ebb and flow. And I really enjoyed this conversation, Terry.
Likewise, Matt. Good luck with you. Good luck with Kooler, and thanks for sponsoring this series. I think it's an incredibly bold and and I mean this in the right way, the right thing to do for a community. So hats off to you for thinking this way, and I appreciate you having me on the show today.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Yeah, the conversations fuel me, man. You enjoy a great day.
Thanks, Matt.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Kooler Lifestyle Podcast. We count on your subscriptions, your likes, your shares, and I encourage you to do that now. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, lower right-hand button. If you're on audio, download this, share it, and we look forward to having you on the next one.